Welcome to the Flight Club Podcast, a woman's guide to leaning out. We give you a behind-the-scenes look at business launch and growth through the stories of successful female entrepreneurs. Here's your host, Felina Hansen, founder and CEO of Hera Hub.
Hello and welcome. I am really looking forward to my conversation today with Hera Calfee. She is an influential and strategic human resource professional with the ability to develop strong partnerships at all organizational levels. She believes that thoughtful and intentional strategic communications is at the core of all healthy organizations and relationships. With this in mind, she helps small to mid-sized companies develop and hone their HR plan to foster an inclusive culture while meeting the business demands. Welcome to the show today, Hera.
Oh, thank you. I'm very happy to be on here. It's always exciting to talk about yourself, but I also just am passionate about the work.
Absolutely. Well, we are excited to get to know you. Obviously, we'll get to current day and the amazing work you're doing now, but we want the story behind Hera first. So tell us about you, where are you from? Talk a bit about education and your 21-year career path before launching your own business.
All right. Well, to start off with, I grew up in Palo Alto in the Bay Area during a time when it was it wasn't Silicon Valley yet, but that changed while I was a kid and everything kind of blew up around me. So I grew up in an area that was very heavily dominated by money and competition for education, technology, etc. So I lived there for quite a while before leaving for school. And I actually had a different career before this one. I went to school, I got my bachelor's degree in physical education, much to the dismay of my father. He equated it to being a poet, and which nothing's wrong with being a poet either. So then I went to graduate school. I got a master's degree in kinesiology, specifically in exercise physiology. And I became a personal trainer and then managed a gym and moved forward in my life in that way. But I had my second child, and frankly, the fitness industry doesn't pay all that great, and I couldn't afford to have two kids in childcare while I was working in the fitness industry. So I went to a staffing agency and I said, I have no idea how I fit into the normal world. This is my background. Can you help me figure it out? And they said, okay, and sent me home. And I thought about it, and I thought, wow, I can't even go to a job interview because I don't have any childcare for my daughter. Yeah. So I called him back and I said, well, would you be able to send me on like a full-time temp job so that I'm ready to go for interviewing and I can afford to put my daughter in childcare? And he said, okay. So I did that and handed my daughter off, fortunately, to a friend that had a home daycare, and went to work in a startup company. And a month later, they hired me into human resources and said, hey, we'll pay for you to get certified in human resources. Of course, when I went there, I was like, what's HR? I've never heard of it before. And then I go to the certification courses and everyone's talking about their background. They're like, well, I went to school for HR. And I said, how did you even know it existed? And it was baffling to me. So I went through that and loved the startup environment, the small company environment, and stayed there for a few years. And then we moved to San Diego in 2000. And I came to another startup in San Diego, which was also amazing. Unfortunately, the company folded. And so I had to move on, and I went from a high-tech startup company to working at Home Depot. And that was a big shift. Yeah. And it was fascinating.
Yeah, that's a big, company culture, I'm sure, was quite different.
Yeah, and compliance, and I mean, just so many things about it were different, but it was fascinating. I loved it. But I did leave there and go back to the high-tech industry. And basically I've bounced around now for the past 20 plus years between technology companies, manufacturing companies, retail companies. It's been a mix, and anywhere from a company with 35 employees to a company with 300,000 employees, and global versus just local in our little area. So I had a lot of variety in what I've worked on, and a lot of cultures that I've worked on, a lot of diversity in the people that I was working with and working for and helping work with each other. And that basically, I mean, just in a nutshell, career-wise, that's what got me to where I am now, though there are some specific experiences that made me really formalize what it is that I wanted to do.
Well, I certainly want to dive into those. But before we do, since you didn't know what HR is, let's back this up a little bit and just talk about, I know you've, had a variety of experiences throughout your career, but how would you define HR? If I was a college freshman at UCSD and I was thinking about my career path, convince me that being in human resources is the best path, the best thing to do, and, kind of just talk about the day-to-day.
All right. Well, the first thing I would do is never tell anyone that it's the best.
Okay. All right. Fine.
And mainly because I think that it's really critical for people to find something that hooks them, that really gives them the proper outlet for what they want to do. And, I couldn't be in marketing. That just doesn't feed me. I love marketing. I appreciate marketing. I need marketing, but it's not for me. So it really depends on what you want to do. But for HR in general, to describe it to people, once upon a time, oftentimes people would just say, oh, is that hiring and firing? And the answer would be yes. But it's really shifted, even in the time that I've been in it, it's really, really shifted, so that instead of being purely around managing your human resources in a company, because the people are what make the company run. So you have to manage those resources. You have to know how to pay them. You have to know how to treat them. You have to know how to leverage the skills and abilities, how to develop them, keep them in the company. You have to be able to manage all of those resources, but it goes beyond that now to the concepts of culture and environment, and also reputation for the company externally. That your vendors and your customers care what you do and what impact you have on society and the world. And human resources comes into that because a lot of that is about people. So it's about communication, and it is about numbers. It is about profit. It's a little bit of everything. So when you think about human resources, yeah, it's people that do recruiting and do hiring. Yes, it's people that help you terminate an employee who's failing in the job for some reason. But it also is a partnership, and a strategic partnership to figure out how to run your company the most effective way that you can.
You've convinced me, Sarah. Sign me up. No, I'm just kidding.
We need you where you are.
Yes, true. Yes, marketing's more my jam. So, but of course, business owners like myself and
Yes.
Some who are listening definitely need all of that, because it's tricky, right? I mean, there's people, and people have personalities, and the personalities
Yes,
of each
do.
other sometimes don't match. So I would imagine, and I know we're going to get into talking about some of the things you're passionate about, and I'll ask you that question here in a minute. But a company like Home Depot, I just want to kind of pause on that a little bit. So interesting, right? A consumer facing company, obviously they sell products, but people, the person that you say, hey, sir, can you help me find aisle, kind of thing. That's front and center in the customer experience, right? And that
Right.
can make or break a company, no matter how great their products are, right? If they have a
That's
bad
right.
experience with an employee. And then kind of where I'm going with this is those employees, I would imagine the turnover at Home Depot maybe is better than its peers, but you're typically, this is a lower wage job and you're asking these individuals to be the face of your company. Any insights or experiences that you want to share that we can learn from, whether it's Home Depot or similar?
All right, sure. And it has a similar concept in all companies. You have to treat your employees well, and sometimes that means compensation, but usually it means other things. So whether it's retail or another organization, it's largely the same. The difference is what type of training you give your employees, and what for the employees that you have, what are their personal motivations and needs? And so when you are in a retail environment, you're correct. The wages tend to be lower. They tend to be hourly wages, which means that they are only paid if they work a specific number of hours, whereas an exempt employee means that they don't get overtime pay, but they're also paid better, and they basically get paid whether they work or not. So it's very different in how you incentivize your employees and how you develop and manage your employees. So for an environment like Home Depot, where yes, retail does tend to have a much higher attrition rate, turnover rate, or in more simple words, people leaving, people coming and going, employees coming and going, it does tend to be much higher than other types of industries. And so the focus has to be on the culture, for one, the environment that people work in. They have to feel valued. They have to feel like they're enjoying what they're doing. And for some people, that's fun. For some people, it's that they know that they're providing a good service or product for other people. And if you don't have that kind of culture, the retail employees, they'll just hop and go get another job down the street because they're out there, because there's so much turnover. So that becomes really, really critical. And then the other part does come down to pay with benefits, because a lot of retail does part-time employees, because you don't have to pay those employees for health insurance. You don't have to do that. They're much cheaper in that way. So if you want to retain them, if you're a company that values developing your employees, which Home Depot was one of those companies. I can't speak to it now because it's been a while since I worked there, but they were famous for like the president of the West Coast portion of the company. When you think there's 300,000 employees back then, that's a large organization. He started off as a lot attendant for the company.
Wow.
Right. So they take them, they develop them, they did pay them well for what they were doing, that they couldn't just hop to another company, and they had fun while doing it. All of those things together made it so that their attrition was actually lower than your standard retail company at that time.
Awesome. Thank you for giving us some context around that, Sarah. Well, I want to get to and spend a little bit of time on what you're doing now. And to lead into that question, you mentioned a few minutes ago, there were some things that happened throughout your career that made you passionate about the work you're doing now. Please talk about that.
All right. Well, to start, I think I should just mention briefly that the way I was raised, I learned a few things from each of my parents, different lessons from each of them, but collectively, I learned that emotions matter, that you can't just ignore them or shut them off. I was taught to pay attention to the underdogs, to love everyone, to ask questions, be curious. And I was taught that you don't need to speak poorly of other people in order to get what you want, and that it's never too late to change directions. And some of those things don't seem all connected, but they collectively have created these moments of clarity for me in both how I was approaching a situation, what I want to do, I guess not both, but all, what I want to do, and in recognizing that I can change my course. I don't have to do the same thing. One of those moments was when I started in HR and I came from the fitness industry. It's completely different, but it had a core element, which was that I get something out of serving other people, and helping other people's lives be better, be healthier, be happier, their mental and physical well-being being improved. So that was one of my pivotal moments. Beyond that, there were a few key ones that made me realize I needed to leave corporate America and go into business for myself. One was when I was working at a company where I had been on the diversity and inclusion team for 5 years, and the chief diversity officer was retiring, and she recommended that I take over for her. And the response that the president of the company said, word for word, was, "I don't believe a white woman can do the job." Which some people are like, okay, well, that doesn't sound great, but I can see how maybe he wants a minority in the job. Yeah. Well, he hired a white man to do the job.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So that was a moment for me. And I left that company not that long after it, went to another company that also provided me quite a few challenges in the culture and environment, a lot of lawsuits for behavior of leadership. So that was a bit of a challenge. So that was another place where I was trying to work against the system to some degree. And then a couple other experiences collected in there were, one is that I was diagnosed a little more than 5 years ago with an autoimmune disease that technically classifies me as disabled. And I've never considered myself that way. Even since then, I've struggled with that concept, but it made me realize all the ways that I had been judging myself and limiting myself because of it, only not knowing it was because of that, because I didn't know that these characteristics of me were based on that disease, like fatigue and weight gain, things like that. And I also started to recognize how I had seen it done to other people, like my daughter, who has ADHD to a pretty extreme degree. And she was bullied when she was a child, and even still is to some degree. And then watching employees and watching friends and hearing the stories and seeing how pervasive it is, even when it's completely unintentional. And when I looked at all of that, knowing in my core what I want to do, how I want to impact the world, and getting to a point of so much frustration trying to create change within a single organization, yet that's not what my full job was. You don't hire somebody to say, make us good. It doesn't work that way. I realized I needed to get outside of corporate America so that I could have a more broad impact across society. And it's a combination of being able to help numerous companies, and especially the smaller companies. I have found you get more opportunity to have that type of impact. And then also being able to work outside of corporations and more with organizations on their approach to society, like San Diego SHRM, which is the San Diego chapter of the largest human resource organization in the country, and being the chair for the diversity and inclusion team, made it so that I could start helping others figure out what they want to do. So I don't know how much time you want to spend on it, but one of the more profound moments for me
this is important because it's obviously seeding the work that you're doing.
It very much so. And it's, I've had a lot of reflection this past year, which I think many people have as we've been stuck at home alone.
Indeed.
So I took over the chair for the diversity committee for San Diego SHRM for 2020. I began in the beginning of 2020, and it was just me. It was a committee that most people didn't know existed. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put a diversity calendar together, and I'm going to start an article once a month and get that posted to increase some awareness and, la-di-da. And I wanted to do more. I had so many ideas, but how do you have the time to do it all by yourself? And everyone's like, oh, that's great. Just keep doing what you're doing. And then in May, I had already been really mulling over the impact that COVID was having on different communities and the disparate impact, the different health outcomes. And what is it that's causing that? And from a human resource perspective, what can we do, whether inside or outside of the company, to help impact those issues? What is it that we're either doing wrong or that we can do more proactively to help improve it? And then I went on a road trip, which I did a lot this past year, and took 5 days, and we drove to Minneapolis. And on the way to Minneapolis, George Floyd was killed. And we arrived into Minneapolis on the second day of the riots, the first night of curfew.
Oh, wow.
And that experience getting to Minneapolis, because we were in Minnesota for about 6 weeks or so, and we spent 3 or 4 days in Minneapolis at 3 different times during those 6 weeks. So we saw what was happening at that moment, fire in the sky or smoke in the sky from the fires, and go driving around the next day, and you'd see a building gone that had been there the day before. And you'd get up in the morning and there would be people just walking and walking and walking down to the area with brooms and buckets to clean up the mess in their community. And the graffiti, it was a very strange place to be in. And it was confusing. How do you do this? We were staying in an Airbnb, for example, and there was a man that lived next door that we saw a couple times who was an African American. And there were a couple moments where he was outside, and as we came out or walked by, he just stared at us. And there was this moment of, whose side are you on? What are you thinking about this? And wanting to have that feeling of having him know that we're on his side, but there's no mechanism to do that in a way that wouldn't be defensive or weird or whatever. So something was stirring at that moment, trying to figure it out. And then the next month, we held a happy hour webinar for San Diego SHRM that was around diversity. And what came out of that were so many people that were saying, I want to do something, but I have no idea what to do. I don't know how to impact this. I don't know how to make it better. I don't know what to do. And I realized by not doing anything all the years, I actually might be contributing. And there was this one house that we drove by a few times in Minneapolis where somebody had hung a long white banner, like a 20, 30 foot long white banner on their fence, and they left out pens and they said, write your messages kind of thing. And there was this one message that somebody had written that said, I can't bring the exact words to my head, but basically it said, I hate the monsters in this world and fear that I am one.
Wow.
And that was what I was hearing people express over and over again. And then we went back. Actually, I was back there in October, November, December of this year as well. So we got to see 6 months later, how is the community healing and what are they doing? And there's amazing artwork, all kinds of things that are just spectacular from it. But what that all did for me, which is the most recent, most profound moment for me, was number one, solidify that I made the right decision, getting out of corporate America, going out on my own so I could have that impact that I want to have. But it also reinforced to me my focus of ensuring that people are treated well, that we're treating each other with kindness, with care, with compassion, even when it doesn't necessarily benefit us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, that was intense. And I thank you for sharing that. As you spoke of that, throughout, the last 5 minutes, I got rounds of goosebumps and just, intense feelings. It definitely was an awakening, and not that there haven't been there should have been thousands of awakenings before that, but it definitely, I think, just at least for me, to your point, I'll just be honest. I'm a middle-aged white woman, right? It's like, am I part of the problem? And I never thought I was, and I really hope I'm not. But to your point, I mean, we all have to do more. So with that and the work that you are doing, talk about the types of companies that you help in your consulting services. And I love this phrase that you have. You help make it grow, make it flow, and make it right. Talk about that continuum again. Maybe give an example of a company you've worked with or the types of industries, and tell us what is make it grow, make it flow, and make it right.
Okay, so the types of companies, it's mostly based on size as opposed to anything else. The smaller company, the small to mid-sized companies, they typically don't have any human resources, or they have somebody responsible for human resosources that is not an HR expert.
The operations coordinator is also the right. HR person.
Exactly. Or finance, or, and that's pretty classic. Even I actually work with a company where the person in charge of HR actually was a graphic designer. And eventually got put in charge. So, and she's phenomenal, but the ramp up to learn and be able to know how to handle situations. I mean, COVID's thrown everybody through a loop. So that's the environment of a company that I would work with. The type of work to make it grow, flow, and right. Essentially, I'll start the other way around. Making it right means that you are ensuring that you're compliant, that you have everything in place that you need to have in place. And the reason why that's important is you can have a company that has the right intentions, and maybe people are even happy at the company, but you might accidentally hire somebody sometime who is not the most ethical, or they're a poor performer. Maybe they even have some sort of an addiction that manifests itself at work. And now there's some consequences to that person. You need to terminate them. You need to demote them, something along those lines. And that person's bitter. Well, even if you've been treating everybody well during that time and they're happy, that one person is going to go to an attorney and say, I don't think I deserved this consequence. And by the way, they're doing this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. And now you've got this class action lawsuit. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars when you weren't even treating anyone poorly. Yeah. So you have to make it right. You have to be compliant. And it's not as hard as people think it is. You just need somebody that knows what to do to just come in and say, okay, let's just check this, and then you're good. Making it flow is about having your process in place, getting done the things you need to do without as much conflict. It's with ensuring that communications are going smoothly. It's ensuring that when there is conflict, that it gets resolved well. It's about having in place the philosophy and the resources to handle your business the way that you want it to be. Then making it grow is what it sounds like. You need to change the company in some way. You need to hire more employees. Maybe you need to restructure because now you're into a new phase. Instead of developing a product, now you're selling a product. Or maybe you're even shifting. You're deciding, well, we don't want to do that as much. Now we're going to go over here and do this as much. Maybe you're going to make N95 masks instead, or hand sanitizer instead of alcohol. That's a really good example.
So many examples of that last year.
Yeah. So now you need to do that. You need to change. You need to grow up. You need to do things differently than you were doing it before. So it's helping a company figure out how to do it and actually do it. So it can be the recruiting, it can be creating a new organizational chart, it can be, and not just the chart, but really strategizing and how do you realign your employees, or we've got these skills right now, but in 2 years, we're going to need these skills. How do we take the people that we have now and develop them so they have those skills, and, or who are we going to need to replace and to be that new picture of us in the future?
It is a lot. I'm telling you, so many things. Oh my goodness. And every small business owner I know, as we've grown Hera Hub, it's changing all the time. I mean, going back to the making it right piece, right? I mean, it's changing constantly. And so having a resource like you to reach out to and say, am I doing this right? Am I crossing all my T's and dotting all my I's?
Yeah. Also having somebody that can say, hey, by the way, this has changed. You need to do this now. Because to your point, labor law changes a lot.
Yeah.
And sometimes it can seem overwhelming and difficult to figure out how to make that change. So a little bit of help from somebody that has seen it, knows how to do it, can make it so much easier and less stressful.
Good. Amen to that. Well, Sarah, let's look forward a bit. 2021, of course, is going to just be an incredible year for all of us. It's going to be night and day different than last year. What are some of the things that you're excited about, the work that you're doing in your business?
My intention mostly is to grow myself. That is the phase that I am in personally, not hiring, but grow the companies that I'm working with and what we're working on. What I'm most excited about is this shift that I'm feeling among whether it's entrepreneurs, people in a company, people outside of companies, whatever it is, this shift of wanting to be part of improving our society and healing from some of our pain that we've been going through. And that when you have people in that mindset, the opportunity of what you can change, you've got more people that are saying, okay, I need to make it right now. Help me with that. And then you've got people saying, I don't know that I'm making this work. Do we have systemic racism within our systems? I don't know if I'm doing something like that. And that's making it flow better. And then for growing, when you have that kind of mindset, I mean, really it transfers into entrepreneurialism. It's let's do something new. Let's be creative. I don't know what I could do before, but let's start talking to each other. Let's start networking more. Let's start collaborating. Let's start creating something. And I am super excited about the type of work and ideas that are going to come out of this, that none of us know what it is right now, but we're going to be seeing some amazing, amazing new things by the end of the year, I believe.
Awesome. I am glad to hear that. Change is needed. And, for a lot of us, it came a little more painfully than we probably wanted, but, it's the way, and there'll be new things coming out of that. So, well, I'm excited for you as your business grows. If our listeners want to reach out to you, want to learn more about your services, about you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, the two easiest ways, I think, are LinkedIn. Seems like just about everybody is there. And if you're not, I highly recommend it. Yes. And my LinkedIn profile is just linkedin.com/Sarah Calfee. Sarah with an H, and then the last name Calfee. And then the other is calfeehr.com, my website. And there is a contact link on there. It's a pretty basic website, but it gives you the basics of what you need and an easy way to reach me.
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks so much for your time today, Sarah.
Oh, thank you. I've enjoyed it, and I look forward to hearing everybody else's podcasts.
Thank you for joining this week's episode of Flight Club, sponsored by Hera Hub. We look forward to sharing more success stories with you soon.